Welcome to Turning Back the Pages, the podcast where children's book authors discuss their favorite childhood books. I'm your host, Allie. Today, author Shruthi Rao is joining me to discuss her favorite childhood book, The Castle of Adventure by Enid Blyton. Shruthi Rao writes for children. Her books, both fiction and nonfiction, have been published in India and the USA. Shruthi likes books, food, trees, benches, science, and long walks. She finds people utterly fascinating. Originally from Bengaluru, India, Shruthi now lives in Northern California. Welcome, Shruthi. I'm so glad to have you here.
Thank you, Ali, for having me here. And I just want to mention that I speak with a stutter. So in case at any point you feel that the audio is breaking up or something like that, it may not be the audio, it may be me. So that's it. I just wanted to get that out of the way.
Thank you, Shruthi. Well, I'm so glad that you're here all the same. So I can't wait to talk about this book that I was unfamiliar with. All right, Shruthi, would you like to give us a recap of The Castle of Adventure?
Yeah. So The Castle of Adventure is written by Enid Blyton, who is a British author of children's books, and she has written nearly 800 books. And when I was growing up in the 80s and the 90s in India, Enid Blyton's books were among the most read books among me and my peers.
Mm-hmm.
So she was everywhere. All the bookstores had her. And The Castle of Adventure is one of her many books that I read, which I was utterly fascinated by. So the copy I had was very old. It belonged to my aunt, and it was already around 15 or 20 years old when it came to me, and the pages were tattered and the pages were kind of falling apart. But I remember reading it a couple of times and then again and again, and it was so fascinating. It was about a castle on a hill which was unoccupied, and there was this flashing lights in the dark, and there were bad guys, and there were underground passages and hidden rooms, and everything that is exciting for a 8-year or a 9-year-old kid.
Right.
So
yeah, I really one of the things that I noticed, I feel like sometimes children's books can lean away from true danger, but this one really seemed to lean into the fascinating, the castle, the finding of the castle and the exploring of the castle. And then also, the bad guys, seemed bad for children.
Yeah. So I think this was written in the 1940s, and there were no stops, I think, at that time. The author just went all out.
Yes.
Yeah. But the thing was, even though it was exciting, you knew that the kids were never in any real danger. Of course, that is the fantasy of a children's book, right? So I felt safe sitting in my room reading this, but my pulse races even now if I think about it.
Yes. Yes. It was a very interesting book, different than the British authors that I have read, though I saw some similarities, but it was very interesting, very, very big adventure. Well, I have some background information on Enid. Enid Mary Blyton was born in August 1897. She was an English children's book writer. Her books have been worldwide bestsellers since the 1930s. A few months after her birth, Enid actually almost died from whooping cough, but she was nursed back to health by her father, Thomas Blyton. In her childhood, he ignited Enid's interest in nature. In her autobiography, she wrote that he loved flowers and birds and wild animals and knew more about them than anyone I had ever met. And you kind of see that in her books as well. Like she wrote a lot about like this particular book, they're looking for an eagle at the beginning, and
Yes.
there's a lot of just they're wandering in the woods around the castle, and there is a lot of nature present in this particular book.
Yes, there is.
So Thomas also passed his interest of gardening in art, music, literature, and theater, and the pair often went on nature walks, much to the disapproval of Enid's mother, who showed little interest in her daughter's pursuits. Thomas Blyton, though, left their family to live with another woman when Enid was 13. Over time, Enid cut off all communication with her family. Blyton studied to become a teacher. She received a teaching certification with distinctions in zoology and principles of education. In 1920, Blyton moved to Chessington and began writing in her spare time. The following year, she won the Saturday Westminster Review writing competition with her essay on the popular fallacy, "To the pure, all things are pure." Blyton's first book, which was Child Whispers, was a 24-page collection of poems published in 1922. On August 28, 1924, Blyton married Major Hugh Alexander Pollock. Pollock was the editor of the book department in the publishing firm George Nunes, which became Blyton's regular publisher. Blyton went on to write 762 books before she died. For many of those years, she was writing 50 books a year. Her work has received a fair amount of criticism, both in her day and since, which Shruthi and I will discuss. But before we get to the criticism, Shruthi, tell me, why did you choose Enid Blyton's work to discuss today?
The main thing is that Enid Blyton is what made me want to be a writer. And her books really opened up the world of writing and adventure and excitement for me. So I had a lot of favorite books as a kid, but when I look back and think about it, The Castle of Adventure just pops up every time. So I thought, so while I am not entirely sure that it is my favorite book, I'm kind of guessing that maybe it is. So I mean, yeah, because it keeps coming up. So I wanted to speak about it also because, in spite of what I know about Enid Blyton and her writing and all the criticism against her, even now, if I read it, it still gives me the same amount of excitement. So I, keep wondering, what is it in her writing that makes me feel that way?
Yeah, that's so fascinating to know your experience with a book and also know that there are problems with the writer or whatever, but also just what we're drawn to as children that makes us feel cozy or safe, and or like what feelings did the book give you as a child?
For me, sitting in an urban city in India, this was as close to fantasy as it could be. It was an entirely different country, place. The characters were not like me, and they were full of adventure. And so it excited me, but at the same time, even at that point, I remember being a little annoyed with the characters because all the boys were the ones who went out on adventures, and the girls stayed back and made sandwiches. So that annoyed me even then. But I was kind of too caught up in the adventure to give it much of a thought. I was like, yeah, whatever. I'm not like that, and then go on with it.
That's so cute. I have two daughters, and my 6-year-old has just realized a few things about how girls have gotten left out of things throughout history, and she thinks that's profoundly unfair and has very much a big justice bone in her body. And so I think that's funny that even at a young age we get annoyed by, like, wait a minute, I want to go on an adventure too.
Yes.
Do you remember the first time reading it? I know you talked about your copy, but do you remember the first time you read it, or who read it to you, or anything like that?
I know I read it on my own,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't remember the first time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I know that I did multiple readings of it, but I don't remember the first time. No.
Yeah. Who's your favorite character, or what's your favorite part of the story?
Yeah, I do have a couple of favorite parts of the story. The characters I don't remember much
Mm-hmm.
because this is not a series that I read much.
Okay.
The others, like the her most famous is the famous five series and also the five find outers. But uh, and so those characters I know much better. These the characters weren't as important as the story for me.
Right.
And in the story, what there are a couple of things I really found fascinating. One was this naturalist boy who kind of hid himself in the at the top of the castle in order to observe an eagle hatching out of
Mm-hmm.
an egg. So that I thought was fascinating, and the climax. In the climax, the bad guys are having a meeting in a secret room underground, and the kids are hiding in that same room. A couple of the kids are under a large four-poster bed, and a couple of them are hiding inside suits of armor.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that was absolutely fascinating. I remember thinking, what if they need to kind of use the restroom? What if they have a cough or a sneeze coming on? So I was right there with them, you know. So yeah, so these are like clearly standing out in my head.
I love that. I remember very different, but there's a Winnie the Pooh, the 1988 version of Winnie the Pooh, where they are hiding in suits of armor. That so when I was reading this book, I recalled that, and I remember
Oh,
have the same thoughts as a child of like. What happens if they accidentally move or they need to go potty or any of those things? So funny what
yeah,
stands out.
yeah,
And yeah, I really, I was very surprised with this being an adventure book. How much time, I know I've said it before, but how much time was spent talking about nature. You pointed out that they were looking at the eagle, and that was really the start of the adventure.
yeah,
Was the eagle was going to be the adventure, and seeing the eagle, and then they stumbled upon another adventure. But how much time she spent really talking about animals in the whole thing.
yeah.
It
Sure.
as a child, I can imagine that was really fascinating. I always loved animals as characters in books, and
Yeah.
my personal favorite character in this was the bird. I think it was Kiki.
Kiki, yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
such a smart
Musty,
bird.
musty, dusty. She kept saying that, I think, right?
Yes.
Mhm.
Yes, and she
Yeah.
seems to be a little bit more perceptive than a typical bird, but she was. It was
Yeah.
really funny. I can imagine
Yeah.
loving that character as a child.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
As a child, what themes stood out to you, either in this book or in any of Enid's books?
I think it was just that sense of adventure and danger and solving mysteries. So some of her mysteries were really clever, especially in the Five Find Outer series. So and apart from that, she has written a number of short stories for kind of fantasy short stories. So all of them were magic and adventure. So those were those were what stood out to me. It was all out of the ordinary. Nothing was ordinary. So that to me,
Mm-hmm.
which is what I mean. So it was all outlandish in a good way. So
Yes. Yeah, I did. Did you, after reading any of her books, did you pretend that you were also in these type adventures, or how did that affect your imaginary play?
Oh, of course. And all of us, we kind of made up our own groups called the Fearless Four or the
I love that.
Tremendous Three or whatever. And we were like, we went around looking for adventure, but nothing really happened. And we kind of, why are there police here? Maybe there's a mystery and we can solve it before the police does, things like that. But yeah, but nothing happened.
I think it's so cool that we are just born with this sense of wanting adventure and wanting to create adventure and just explore and see what's out there.
Yeah.
And I think
Yes. Yeah.
she really, at least in this book and what it sounds like the others, used that to her advantage in her writing.
Yes. Absolutely. Yeah.
Turning Back the Pages is sponsored by bookshop.org. Okay, no, not really, but let's talk about bookshop.org. Bookshop.org works to connect readers with independent booksellers all over the world. Every purchase on the site financially supports independent bookstores. I've chosen my local independent bookstore, Thank You Books, for when I purchase a book from bookshop.org. And Turning Back the Pages has its own shop. All the books discussed on the show can be found on the show list at the store. To find out more, you can click on the link in the show notes. Or, if you wanted to do it the hard way, Google bookshop.org and search for Turning Back the Pages under the shop search on the website. Happy shopping, happy reading. You have children, correct?
Yes, I have a 17-year-old.
Okay.
Yeah.
Has your child ever read any of Enid's books?
She has. So when she was very young, I wanted to introduce my favorite author at that time to her, and that was when I started rereading those books. I kind of realized all these other things which I hadn't
Yeah.
noticed when I was a kid. But
Yeah.
but nevertheless, I just gave it to her, and she liked them. So one thing is, a lot of the kids of today don't enjoy Enid Blyton.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because of the, I don't know, maybe it sounds archaic, maybe the language is too, I don't know, straightforward or whatever. But my daughter liked it. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
not a not an extreme fan, but she actually enjoyed it, and she also pointed out all the sexist and
Right.
racist things in it. So I was like, okay, I've taught her well.
Good job, Mom.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's very interesting that she noticed that. That's good. So that brings me to the question: how has reading it changed through the years? And we discussed in our emails when we first started talking about Blyton that she does have some problematic issues. I saw a few in this book,
Yes.
but you are my Enid expert. So
Yeah.
just talk about what have you seen and how do we deal with that when we're reading a beloved author?
Yeah. So I think so. Yeah. The thing is, her stories are racist, xenophobic,
Mm-hmm.
and classist even,
Mm-hmm.
and of course the sexist, which I already noticed when I was a kid, but I didn't have a word for it. I didn't know how to
Right.
express it. But as an adult, when I read it, I was kind of horrified and kind of sad.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, when I read those books again, I it was very hard for me to read it as an adult. The moment I opened those pages, I became an 8-year-old again, and I kind of glossed over all those problems.
Mm-hmm.
So and then I started wondering about myself. I said, why am I doing this? This
Mm-hmm.
is wrong. the kind of ideas here are wrong. They are even harmful. And why am I condoning them, ignoring them? But I don't have an explanation, because fact remains that when I start reading it, I become an 8-year-old again.
Mm-hmm.
And as an 8-year-old, it hadn't stood out to me except the sexist part. So it is what it is. And I know now, like I can see it with its negatives and its positives, and
Mm-hmm.
I can pick out what I like and what I don't like, and still I can appreciate her talent in keeping an 8-year-old absolutely engrossed.
Yeah.
And it is what it is.
Yeah, I know there are books that I read as a child and have returned to with my 6-year-old that I have been surprised at what I didn't pick up. And it's like my love for the overall feel of the book can kind of trump the problems, and it's a really interesting thing to grapple with, of
Yeah.
especially when your child might pick up on some of the issues that you didn't.
Yes. Yes.
There have been some books that, I mean, this particular book, there's a character, now I can't remember her name.
Are you talking about Cassie?
Yes,
Yeah.
the way that
Yeah.
they talk about Tassie is
Yes.
very problematic.
Very problematic. It's very classist and very, yeah, very
Yes.
uncomfortable. Yeah.
Yes, they spend, it's so interesting because it is like, in some ways they really appreciated Tassie for her ability to navigate and help them get around, and yet they make fun of her smell,
Yes.
and her distaste for baths, and they
Yes.
quite literally call her a less of a child and more of
More of
an
an animal, right?
intelligent animal. And it was like I
Yes.
literally
Yes.
gasped.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And yet the adventure continues, and I know there are books that I read as a child that have some morals that I would question today. It's just really interesting to see, how we grapple with that
Yes.
when we loved a book as a child.
Yes. Absolutely. Yeah.
For me, some of the books that I'm reading now to my kids, I've noticed language is not bad language, but we're very, one of our things in our house is, we don't call people idiots or stupid or anything like that. And there are a lot of older books that are very quick to call people idiots or stupid or the
Yes.
R word or
Yes.
anything like that, where I'm like, oh
Yes.
my.
Yes.
And so interesting of how that changes, and how it was wrong. I mean, the classism was wrong then, but it was looked at so differently, and now that's the problem. And when I was doing a lot of research, it seemed to be in the 1950s when she was criticized, that wasn't what they were criticizing her for. They were criticizing her more for the sometimes simplistic writing, and I just thought
Right.
that was so interesting that I had to look harder for the problematic parts.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, yeah. Even during her time, there were people who kind of raised,
Mm-hmm.
especially there is a character in her Noddy books called
Mm-hmm.
the Gollywog, and the
Mm,
Gollywog is always the bad guy. And,
mm-hmm.
it was quite blatant,
Mm-hmm.
and she was called out for it, but I don't think anything happened at that point.
Right.
So we can't even, some people make excuses for her and say, oh, she was a product of her time and all that, but it is not so, because there were
Mm-hmm.
others who were much more aware
Mm-hmm.
at her time also. So
I think it's interesting to look back, and also a cautionary tale of, what are we missing today in what we're
yes,
writing, and how it's going to
yes,
be viewed, and just being sure that we are I don't know, just representing people well
Yes,
and
yes.
telling the truth and giving good literature to our children.
Yeah, that's an excellent point, Ali. I've thought about that as well.
If you could tell young Shruti that you're an author, would she be surprised?
I think she she would probably not be surprised because that's what she wanted
Hmm.
to be when she was a kid. But authors were these um, ethereal beings in her mind. So I think she would have been like well, a mixture of shock and surprise, maybe. Or not quite, because I mean that's what she wanted, but I don't think she ever thought that it could happen.
I love that answer, Shruti. I think it's such a cool thing to have written, and I'll move on to your book. The one I'm holding right now is Karibu. When was this one published?
And this came out in Feb of this year,
I
February. Yeah.
loved this book. I've read it to my both my children several times now, and we are planning on making karabu sometime this
Oh,
week.
great.
This was such a fun one. It was so fun to go through this little tale, and then I read your author's note at the end, just kind of talking about where it came from and how it was a modern retelling of a South Indian folk tale your grandmother used to tell you. And this was such a fun book. So can you tell us about your book?
Yeah, yes, yes. So this was a story I heard growing up. It's a folk tale, and there are many versions of it all across uh, South India and even North India, I think. The basically it's the name of a treat which gets muddled up as the
Mm-hmm.
person kind of chants it and goes back home. The It gets muddled up. So I started wondering how it would be if the character who is walking back home with the name of that food in his mind, what if all his encounters muddle it up even more and more? So
Mm-hmm.
that was how it happened, and then I brought in modern characters and modern situations, and it became funnier and funnier in my head. So I thought, yeah, this will be an excellent kind of tongue twisting game of telephone but with a difference.
Yes. Yeah, I could tell that you had fun writing it because it was
Yeah.
very fun to read. It's very funny, it's very clever, and I loved the whole thing. Both my girls giggled, and the illustrations are so colorful too, and I we have loved anything that has introduced our southern little selves to other cultures, and so that this was a folk tale that I was not familiar with, so just so appreciative of this book. It was really fun.
Thank
um
you. I'm so glad you liked it, Ali.
yeah, I really did. Who do you hope reads this book?
So here's the thing. So I wrote this as a funny book. I wrote
Hmm.
this as something that will make kids laugh. So I want everybody to read it. I wrote this book as a funny story, and very often it is categorized as a cultural story,
Hmm.
which it is. I mean,
Hmm.
I'm not denying it is a cultural story, but first and foremost, it's a funny story, a
Yes.
story that of wordplay and of
Hmm.
making people laugh. So
Hmm.
the when a book like this is slotted into the cultural category and kind of kept away
Hmm.
from the mainstream funny books, I
Hmm.
feel it's not fair on that book. You
Yeah,
know,
I agree. This is
yeah,
a just a funny
Exactly.
that just happens to have a different cultural insight.
Exactly. That's what I'm talking about. So, which is why I want everybody to read it, not only those who are looking to introduce kids to
Mm-hmm.
different cultures, or not the ones who are looking to kind of see their own culture reflected in the book.
Mm-hmm.
And while I'm happy for that to happen, I also want a wider audience for that, you know?
Yes, absolutely. Well, I think everyone should pick this up. So, if you have made it to the end of this podcast and you're needing a book for your kids, I have one for you from our author Shruthi Rao. It's Kadabu, a silly South Indian folktale, and it is fantastic. Well, Shruthi, do you want to share where people can follow you or buy your book or anything else you want to promote?
Yeah, I'm on Insta, I'm on Facebook, and I have a website. So you can find me. I'm kind of easy to find online. And if you're buying the book, I would love for you to buy it from your uh, local independent bookstore if that's an option for you.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and yeah, any questions at all, I'm easy to find.
Thank you for joining me in this episode of Turning Back the Pages. If you have any author suggestions, please feel free to email me at whatallywrites@gmail.com. You can follow the show on Instagram or Twitter at whatallywrites. Ally is ALLY. And don't forget to subscribe.